Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of video games. We cover all kinds from the mainstream to the indie, so I hope you enjoy your stay, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. When the Warrior of Light meets back up with Varshan and Razad-Han, he still hasn't heard anything from Y'shtola about a new method of getting back to the Void. The lack of information has been making him antsy, and he's not the only one. Estinian has been so bored that he's been volunteering to help train soldiers without even complaining a little bit, which is very out of the ordinary for him. Zero has been spending her extra time restoring her ether. In other words, she's been eating a lot. She's about to head out to do just that, and she invites you to come along, which is kind of out of the ordinary for her. Varshan was planning on going through the city anyway, so he decides to tag along too. After picking up some spices, because while the people of Razad-Han like their food to have a bit of kick, nobody likes their food as spicy as Zero does, so she likes to bring her own ingredients for a curry. She grabs enough to make some for everyone at the restaurant to have a bit too, and while the old Zero wouldn't be all that eager to share, this more people-friendly version of her isn't against the idea. Granted, I think the real reason she's fine with sharing is because most people's tongues would burn off if they try to eat her food. Because the Warrior of Light is good at everything, she's perfectly fine with eating a bowl of fire while the rest of the patrons are very nearly dead from it. Varshan decides to bring some food to Estinian, but he doesn't bring the curry because apparently the dragon doesn't think his reaction to it will be all that funny. The dragoon's in his room shirtless and sweaty doing push-ups on his fingers like a boss, and Zero proves that not only has she started liking food since she's been staying on the source, but she also seems to have a thing for half-naked sweaty men. Since Estinian was already half-naked, her first thought was to join him. Unfortunately, Varshan proves that dragons are the worst wingmen and he doesn't let the woman get naked. Once Estinian's finally put some clothes on, Y'shtola shows up, and she's brought Urianger with her. She's finally figured out a way to get back to the 13th, and since learning said information took a trip to the moon, she decided to get some help from Urianger. After she brought him up to speed on everything you've all been doing, he was more than willing to join in on the mission to save Ashdaya. From what Rubicante said, both Golbez and Ashdaya are on the moon of the 13th, and while you have the means of going back and forth to the moon from the source, even if you went back to the Void, you wouldn't have a way to get to the moon there. So Y'shtola figured it'd be better to cut out the middleman and open a gate straight from the source's moon to the 13th. Granted, doing that could make a way for Void Scent to come through to the source, so Y'shtola got Urianger to help her figure out a way to handle that not so little problem. Since they're working on the moon, he decided to get the Loporrits and the Watcher to help too. Y'shtola's figured out how to actually open the gate, which is definitely the more difficult objective, and she thinks her method will only work because she's doing it on the moon. There's a lot of stuff that she'll need to pull it off, including a whole lot of ether since the hole has to be large enough for two very large dragons to go through. And the way she plans on getting the ether there is by using the Tower of Babel in Garlemald. Fandaniel had used it to break Zodiark's prison. Now she wants to use it to open the Void Gate. She's gonna head back up to the moon to set up the means of using the ether, but she'll need help from Varshan's alchemist again, namely Nadana. She wants Estinian to play the role of bodyguard for them since a trip to Garlemald isn't exactly safe, and he's more than eager to do anything that gives him the opportunity to get a bit of action. Urianger is gonna handle all the preparations planetside, and he's gonna need your help. Once Varshan switches to his more useful vessel, Urianger lets you all know the full details of the plan. While Y'shtola and the others get stuff set up on the moon, you all have to get the ether you need and get it to the Tower of Babel. The tower was able to draw ether from the land, so using it to shoot ether to the moon won't be all that hard. But drawing ether from the land is not exactly healthy for the planet, so you'll have to find a different way to get it. The second mission is getting the Garleans to actually let you use the tower. The Ilzabar contingent is in control of the thing, and with all of the destruction that it caused the last time it was used, they might not be willing to let you play around with it. Varshan doesn't think it'll be all that hard to convince them once you tell them what you're working on. He thinks finding a place to gather all the ether that you need will be harder, but Urianger already has a place in mind. There's an island called Ham near Sharlayan. The place has so much ether that it sprays out in geysers. That was the island that the Sharlayans had planned on using to power the Ragnarok spaceship, but we ended up using other means to power the ship, so none of the ether from the island had been used. That means all you need to do is ask the forum and they should let you get as much as you need. Zero's not all that fond of having to ask permission to do literally everything because it's kind of annoying, but that's just how things work when you're dealing with governments and stuff. Normally the Scions would be able to avoid a lot of the red tape, but since they've officially disbanded, that bit of freedom is gone. However, you do have access to the students of Baldesion, so you all head to Old Charlene to talk to Crow. When you get there, she's in the middle of talking to everyone's favorite gleaner, Aaronville. He and Crow swap stories every now and then, and since he travels the world a lot, he constantly sees things that the students would be interested in. He's about to be gone on an extended trip, so he came by to talk to Crow before he left. For once he's not headed off on gleaner business, this time he's going home. He seems eager to head off, but since he knows the islands, Varshawn decides to tell him about what you're all working on. It was a good idea to ask him since he's been almost everywhere, but it turns out that one of the few places that he hasn't been is the Isle of Ham. The place is under the direct control of the Forum, so very few people are allowed to ever go there. That means you'll be going in mostly blind, but Crow can at least handle the whole getting you access thing. You still need to figure out how to collect the ether that you'll need, so that means you'll have to talk to someone who was involved with building the spaceship. There's a researcher named Margaret who worked on the ship's engines, so she's likely your best bet. And since you'll have to wait for Crow to deal with the forum's paperwork, you all head off to find out how to collect the ether once you make it to the Isle. Margaret, like most sciencey types, is always happy to talk about her work, so she tells you everything you need to know about the special tanks that they made to transport the ether off of the Isle. The things could hold a lot of ether, and she's kind of upset that they never got to use them after they spent all of that time making them. They've been stored somewhere, but she's not exactly sure where since stocking shelves isn't exactly in her job description. The person who does know is the mullet-having mustachioed Lalafell Kokal Dakal. Once you tell him why you need the tanks, he's more than happy to give them to you since you did save the world and all of that. So once Crow finishes with the forum, you'll be good to go. She shows up with Alphino's dad in tow right when Kokal throws some insults at the forum because of course she did. They've agreed to let you go to the Isle, but with the crazy amounts of ether that's flowing through the place, it's basically acted like steroids for the creatures living there, and they've gotten a bit bigger and more vicious. As payment to the forum for letting you go, they want your group to kill as many of the overgrown critters as you can. Zero's surprised that they're charging you so little for the amount of ether that you plan on taking. But the forum owes the students of Baldesion a lot considering you all stopped the final days, and they clearly don't like owing people, so they're trying their best to pay their debt off as soon as possible, which works out fine for you. They've already got your ship ready, so Kokal goes off to load up the tanks while you all get ready to head to the Island of Monsters and Ether. And right before you head off, your crew is joined by none other than Thancred, who it's always good to have around. And that's where we're going to stop for today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Donate if you can, and I'll see you all next time.